Hi, I'm Sedona. I used to think being the quiet one in the family meant peace, but it turns out it just made me easier to erase. They told me to postpone my wedding for my sister's emotions. Then they didn't show up at all. Later, I found out the guest list had been altered, money transferred from my account, and my face missing from my own photos. But what hurt most wasn't what they took. It was realizing they never saw me as part of the story to begin with. And when I finally spoke up, they sued me. What kind of family does that? And what happened when I finally stood up for myself? On the record? When I told my parents I was getting married, it was over meatloaf and mashed potatoes at the same dinner table I'd grown up around. Same creaky chairs, same butter dish, same unspoken tension. I had barely finished the sentence. Daryl proposed? When Mom put her fork down, slowly, like she was bracing for an aftertaste she didn't ask for. Dad looked over his glasses but didn't say a word. It was Rhiannon's name that broke the silence, of course. Do you think this is really the right time? Mom said, tilting her head just enough to pretend it was concern. You know Rhiannon's barely keeping it together. All those therapy bills, she hasn't even processed the breakup. I nodded. Of course I did. I always did. I folded my napkin, took a sip of my iced tea, and pretended I wasn't swallowing disappointment. Mom went on. Maybe just give it a little time, a few months, until your sister's in a better place. So I postponed my engagement announcement. I let them finish dinner, talking about Rhiannon's latest yoga retreat and how she was thinking about starting a candle line. The silence around my news? That wasn't new, but that night it felt heavier. 8 months later, I got married. I sent out invitations, digital and physical. Daryl and I paid for everything ourselves, and every detail mattered. Not because it had to be perfect, but because it was mine. It was finally mine. On the morning of the wedding, I checked my phone 3 times. No message from Mom, no call from Dad. At 10:42 a.m., a text finally came in. We're not coming. Rhiannon didn't sleep last night. She's in a fragile state. It wouldn't feel right to leave her alone today. No apology. No excuse beyond that. Just, don't expect us. When I walked down that aisle, I saw every chair filled, except 2 in the front row. No flowers, no ribbons, just the imprint of people who should have been there, but chose not to be. Daryl's mom, Angela, cried through the whole ceremony. She danced with me later when I didn't have a father-daughter moment. She even helped bustle my dress. At the reception, while people buzzed and clinked glasses, a man I barely knew, someone from Daryl's old office, walked up to me and asked, "Your folks get lost on the way here?" I smiled, the kind that stretches tight but doesn't touch your eyes. No, just lost in their priorities. I excused myself, found the bridal suite, and shut the door. It wasn't until I sat down, alone with the noise muffled behind the wall, that my body finally let go. My hands shook, my throat clenched, but I didn't cry. Not really, just leaked a little grief I'd been holding since that dinner over meatloaf. Later that night, when everyone was drunk or dancing or both, I looked back at those 2 empty chairs. They stayed untouched the entire evening. Even the caterers asked me if they should remove them. I told them no, let them sit, let them be a monument. I wasn't angry, not yet. I told myself it was fine, that I'd expected too much. But then, while packing up after the reception, I walked over to the gift table. Something felt off. I counted twice. Then again. Envelopes were missing. I didn't say anything right away. I just stared at the table, like maybe I'd miscounted. Like I could will the envelopes to reappear if I stood still long enough. But deep down, I already knew something wasn't right. 2 days later, Daryl and I sat at our small dining table, the one with a leg that wobbled slightly no matter how many times he'd tried to fix it. We were sorting through cards and gifts, writing thank you notes with the kind of tired joy only newlyweds understand. But something didn't add up. I thought your Uncle Rob gave us a check, I asked, flipping through a stack of cards. He did. I remember him slipping it in a gold envelope, Daryl said without looking up. Said he wanted us to use it for a honeymoon cabin. I went back through the pile. Nothing gold, nothing from Rob, or Aunt Claudia, or the Myers family. At least 6 envelopes we both remembered had vanished. That's when Daryl said, "Hang on, let me pull the security cam footage from the venue. I think the gift table was in frame." While he worked on that, I scrolled through text messages. One from my mother popped up from the night of the wedding. Short, dismissive. Rhiannon took a few envelopes home to keep them safe. She'll bring them by next week. I hadn't thought much of it then. I was too exhausted, too emotionally spent to read between the lines. But now it tasted sour. Daryl tilted the laptop toward me. There, see that? The footage was grainy, but clear enough. Rhiannon, alone at the gift table, looking around before slipping several envelopes into her designer tote bag. She wasn't frantic. She wasn't panicked. She looked like someone cleaning up after a party, like it was her event. "They'll bring them by," I repeated under my breath, then shut my phone off. They never did. Later that week, I stopped by my parents' house to grab a storage bin I'd left in the garage, wedding decor, that hadn't made it to the venue. It was supposed to be a quick in and out. I didn't even take my coat off. But the house was empty, and as I walked through the hallway toward the garage, something pulled me toward the guest room, my old room. I don't know why I opened the closet. I hadn't slept there in years. But there it was, my mom's old jewelry box, the one she used to keep locked, the one she'd scolded me for touching when I was 11. It was unlocked now, sitting on the top shelf like it had been forgotten. I opened it. Inside were a few trinkets, pearls, cufflinks, a tiny gold cross from her first communion. And then, beneath it all, folded neatly, was a pink envelope. The stationery looked expensive, the kind that leaves a faint shimmer under the light. It was a letter, a real one. Handwritten, flowing and elegant in a way I didn't know my mother's handwriting could be. To my beautiful Rhiannon. I sat down on the edge of the bed as I read. "You are everything I ever dreamed of in a daughter. Your grace, your beauty, your strength. Watching you walk across that stage at your modeling showcase was one of the proudest moments of my life. I see so much of myself in you, and I know, without a doubt, you are destined for great things." I couldn't breathe. My eyes scanned the rest of the page, looking for context, a date, 3 years ago. It wasn't the words that gutted me. It was knowing they existed at all. I had never received anything like that, not even close. I folded the letter back with care, slid it into its envelope, and returned it to its spot. Then I stood up, walked out, and left the bin behind. I didn't need one more reminder of what they'd chosen not to give me. Outside, the wind had picked up. My car smelled faintly of lavender from the sachet Daryl had tucked under the seat last month. I sat behind the wheel, hands resting at 10 and 2, and stared at the dashboard clock as the numbers flipped forward. For the longest time, I told myself the distance between me and my family was circumstantial, that we'd just fallen out of rhythm, that people change, that I was busy, that they were distracted. But it's funny, when someone stays emotionally absent long enough, you start inventing reasons for them. Not to protect them, to protect yourself. You start building excuses because the idea that they simply chose not to love you the same, that's unbearable. I didn't text my mom that I'd been there. I didn't follow up about the missing envelopes. I didn't mention the footage. I didn't say anything. That night, while Daryl slept with a hand draped over my waist, I lay awake watching the ceiling fan spin. My chest didn't feel heavy. It felt hollow. The next day, I made coffee, checked work emails, and went on like nothing happened. Like I hadn't found written proof that my mother had a favorite child and wasn't even ashamed of it. I didn't say anything, yet, but something inside me was shifting. It wasn't sadness anymore. It was certainty. Maybe there was never meant to be a letter for me. Maybe I was never meant to be in her story at all. I didn't sleep much after that. I wasn't angry, not in the way people expect. It was quieter than that. A strange stillness, like hearing the echo of your own breath in a house you grew up in that no longer feels like home. 3 mornings later, a package from the photographer arrived. Dariel left it on the kitchen counter before heading to work. "Your photos came," he said casually, not knowing how heavy that sentence would land. I waited until lunchtime. I made myself a sandwich, took 2 bites, pushed the plate aside, and opened the USB drive on my laptop. The first image came up. It wasn't me. It was Rhiannon, in a champagne-colored dress, standing in front of the floral arch I'd chosen. She was smiling, posed like it was her engagement. I clicked through the files. Group shots where Rhiannon was always in the middle, laughing with my bridesmaids, holding the bouquet. The bouquet I paid for. The bouquet I held when I stood alone at the altar without my parents. I scrolled further. No close-up of me during the vows. No shots of Dariel's tears when I said I'd never known unconditional love until him. Just Rhiannon beaming beside the cake. I called the photographer. Tried to keep my tone light, polite. "Hey, I just got the preview album. Did some shots get left out?" There was a pause, papers rustling. "Oh, I think your mom requested which ones to include for the print draft. She emailed me about it a few days after the wedding." My jaw tightened. "I don't remember that." "Yeah," she said, cheerful, unaware. "The email came from her address. She wanted more of your sister. Said it'd be good for family keepsakes." I thanked her, hung up, and just stared at the laptop screen. Of course. Of course they wanted to remember Rhiannon, because remembering me would mean facing what they chose not to show up for. That weekend, we went to brunch with Dariel's side of the family. I wore a denim jacket and forced myself to smile. Mavis, my aunt from Michigan, sat across from me, sipping her tea. "We were really surprised not to get the final RSVP," she said between bites of toast. "We thought maybe it was a small private ceremony. Didn't want to push." I froze. "Wait, you never got your invite?" She shook her head. "Nope. We got the save the date, but nothing after. Claudia said the same thing." My fingers curled around my mug. "I sent those out myself. I double-checked every name." Mavis shrugged. "Maybe it got lost in the mail?" 3 more people, extended family, brought up the same thing over the next few days. People I knew I'd included. People I had wanted there. Back home, I opened the RSVP dashboard Dariel helped me set up. It let us track who opened, responded, declined. At first glance, everything looked fine. But when I clicked into the back-end log, something only someone with admin access could do, I saw the problem. Dozens of invites had been opened, then deleted. The IP address? Logged under an alternate email labeled rjennings.archive. I recognized the recovery phone number. It was Rhiannon's. No one else had the login credentials. Except her. Because Mom had said, "Let your sister help. She's good with planning." I didn't tell Dariel right away. I needed time to process it on my own. Instead, I printed the email logs. I highlighted the timestamps. I took screenshots. Then I emailed them to myself, subject line, "In case I forget." That night, after dinner, Dariel asked me if I wanted to watch a movie. I said I needed a hot bath first. I soaked in silence, eyes closed, head back, the sound of the faucet dripping in slow rhythm. My body felt tired, but my mind was sorting. They didn't forget me. They erased me. They edited me out of my own celebration, like I was an afterthought, like my love story was a footnote in someone else's autobiography. And erasure isn't passive, it's a conscious act. You don't accidentally cut someone from every group photo. You don't unintentionally delete their guess from a list. That's not carelessness. That's cruelty, dressed in politeness, wrapped in silence. So no, I didn't cry. Not then. I just made a new folder on my computer. I named it Truth. I dragged the screenshots in. I started cataloging. Because I wasn't spiraling, I wasn't shrinking, I was preparing. The next week slipped by in fragments, work emails, grocery lists, and a few nights where I thought I might actually forget what they did. I didn't. But for the sake of getting through the day, I played along with normal. Thursday afternoon, I was sorting tax documents at the kitchen table, trying to get everything ready for our accountant. Daryl was at work, and I had the place to myself. Our coffee maker sputtered in the background while I printed off receipts and contracts we'd need to itemize deductions from the wedding. When I opened the venue folder on my laptop, a PDF caught my eye. It had been emailed directly to me by the events manager, marked as finalized copy. I clicked it without thinking. Then I stopped breathing. There it was. The signature line, primary contract holder, Rhiannon Jennings. My fingers hovered above the touchpad. I scrolled back up. Everything looked like it should have, except it didn't. My name was only mentioned once, as the honored guest. The client listed was Rhiannon, her email, her phone number, her name on every line that mattered. I blinked, once, twice, 3 times. I went into my transaction history, pulled up the deposit I'd made in person 6 months ago. Cash. Paid in full. I remembered the visit clearly. I'd taken a half-day off to meet the venue coordinator myself. The next email notification came in 2 hours later. Subject: quick note from Rhiannon Jennings. Hey sis, since I took care of the deposit and contract, it would be great if you could Venmo me your half. $250 should cover it. No rush. I stared at the screen like it had slapped me. I didn't answer. I didn't need to. Instead, I printed the PDF, added it to the Truth folder, and took a screenshot of the email. Then, I opened the security footage again, Rhiannon at the gift table, casually slipping envelopes into her purse. This wasn't just about attention anymore. This was about money. The following afternoon, I stopped by my parents' house. I had a small package addressed to them, a framed photo from the wedding of Daryl and me. The one picture I had where I still looked like a bride. It felt polite to share it, even though it felt hollow doing so. Mom wasn't home. Dad didn't come to the door, but Letitia, our part-time housekeeper, was outside near the garage, sorting trash bags. I almost waved and left, but something about her face made me pause. "Sedona?" she asked, tucking her gloves into her apron. "You doing okay?" I hesitated. "I'm managing." She stepped a little closer, then lowered her voice. "You didn't hear it from me. But a month before your wedding, I overheard a conversation between your mom and Rhiannon." Letitia glanced back at the door. They were in the kitchen, whispering. Something about keeping the guest list clean and making sure the day didn't turn into a pity parade. I didn't say a word. I just stood there still, while the wind rustled through the trash bags. "They talked like it was for your benefit, like you'd be overwhelmed if there were too many people. But then I heard your mom say..." She paused, lowered her eyes. "We just can't have the wrong child be the center of attention." My stomach turned cold. Letitia met my gaze. "I didn't know what to say. I figured it wasn't my place. But you deserve to know. It wasn't a mistake. They planned it." I swallowed hard and nodded. "Thank you for telling me." That night, after Daryl went to bed, I stood in front of the mirror and looked at myself for a long time. Not to judge what I saw, not to cry, just to witness myself. I thought about how many times I'd been asked to shrink, to be flexible, to let things go for the sake of the family. How many times I'd told myself it wasn't that bad, that I was being sensitive, that maybe it really was just miscommunication. But contracts aren't miscommunications. Invoices don't lie. And people don't accidentally assign credit for your life to someone else. I pulled my hair back into a bun, washed my face, brushed my teeth. Then I sat down at my computer and opened a new document. I typed one line at the top. "They've turned this into a transaction, so I'll treat it like one. This wasn't a misstep. This was strategy. Control disguised as kindness. Theft dressed in silk. They'd taken my wedding, my story, my name, and they'd handed it to the person they'd always considered the real star of the family. So fine, let them have the spotlight. I was building something quieter, but far more permanent. After saving the PDF and closing the laptop, I didn't go to bed. I couldn't. My hands were steady, but my chest carried a kind of still tension I hadn't felt since the night of the wedding. I walked out to the porch and let the cold air hit me. The street was silent. No cars, no footsteps, just the occasional rustle of wind through bare branches. I stood there for a long while, thinking. When I came back inside, I sat down at the desk again and messaged James, Darielle's cousin. He'd casually mentioned filming parts of the wedding on his DSLR, mostly for fun. He wasn't a professional, but I remembered him being meticulous about camera angles. "Hey," I typed, "any chance you still have the raw footage from the wedding?" He responded within 10 minutes. "Yep, I've got everything on a hard drive. You want it?" "Yes." He dropped it off the next morning on his way to work. No questions asked, just a plastic case with a Post-it on top. "Hope it helps." I waited until Daryl left for a site visit before plugging it in. The files were unedited, time-stamped, unpolished. I started with the footage from the ceremony, expecting shaky hands or background noise. What I got was something else entirely. There she was, my mother, arms wide open as she greeted Rhiannon at the venue entrance. A kiss on the cheek, a compliment about her dress. "You look radiant, honey." I didn't hear her say that to me. Then Rhiannon, standing next to me as we were getting lined up for photos, tugging at my bouquet. "Not your color, really," she whispered with a half laugh, as if my peach-toned arrangement offended her personal aesthetic. Later, I watched my mom wave the photographer away from a group shot. "Let's get one with just Rhiannon and the girls," she said dismissively, as if I was just another person on the periphery. I was standing right there. The last nail was a toast, completely impromptu. Rhiannon had grabbed the mic during the reception, smiled as she thanked everyone for making this a special day for our family. Our family! No mention of me. No acknowledgement that it was my wedding day. That I was the bride. I watched my face in the background. I wasn't smiling, and I wasn't in frame, at all, for the last 4 minutes of that video. I sat back, arms crossed over my chest, laptop screen casting a cold light onto my face. It wasn't anger that filled me this time. It was confirmation. They didn't just minimize me, they deleted me. On purpose. That afternoon, while heating leftovers in the microwave, a message popped up in my social inbox. Someone I hadn't spoken to in over a decade. Doreen. Back in college, she'd been in a few of my marketing classes. We weren't close, but we'd shared a handful of group projects and mutual eye rolls when Rhiannon visited campus, floating through like she owned the place. The message was short. "Hi Sedona, I saw your name mentioned on a wedding thread in a forum. I wasn't sure if it was you, but if it is, I just wanted to say something about your sister. Because what happened to you isn't new." I stared at the message, unsure whether to engage, but curiosity won. We messaged for a while. Doreen told me that Rhiannon had dated a guy named Marcus back in college. He'd been planning to propose to his long-term girlfriend. According to Doreen, Rhiannon found out and inserted herself, became the supportive friend to both parties, then started a rumor that the girlfriend was cheating. The engagement ended 3 weeks later. "She told me once," Doreen typed, "that if you delay a woman's ring long enough, you get to wear the crown instead." She attached a screenshot, a text from Rhiannon. "One ring delayed is a crown retained." I didn't need more proof, but I saved it anyway. That night, I created a new folder inside my truth file. I named it Pattern. James's footage went in, Doreen's screenshot, a copy of the venue contract, the RSVP deletion logs, screenshots of Rhiannon at the gift table, every lie they told, every move they made while I was too distracted or too polite to push back. Daryl came home to find me organizing documents on the floor like a puzzle. "You okay?" he asked. I nodded. "I am now." Because this wasn't about revenge. This was about record. They had curated a version of the wedding, of my life, that fit their comfort. I had let them. I had swallowed it all to keep peace. But now, peace looked like truth. even if it was uncomfortable. I opened a blank email, addressed it to a legal contact one of my friends had recommended after her own family lawsuit the year before. I didn't write much, just a subject line, intent to respond, and one sentence. They've crafted their story for too long. I'm ready to present mine. I hit send. Then I closed the laptop, stood up, and poured myself a glass of water. The house was quiet. Darielle was in the shower. The night was calm. But I wasn't in hiding anymore. The email was sent. The folder was organized. I had built a wall of proof, brick by digital brick. But still, I didn't expect the knock on the door that came the following Tuesday morning. It was just after 10 a.m. I was still in sweats, folding laundry in the living room, when the doorbell rang. Through the window, I saw a man in a gray blazer holding a thick envelope. My stomach tensed. "Sedona Jennings?" he asked. I nodded. "You've been served." He handed me the envelope, turned, and walked away before I even spoke. Back inside, I placed the envelope on the counter and stared at it like it might bite. Dariel came in from the garage a few minutes later and saw me frozen in place. "You okay?" he asked. "Rhiannon's suing me." I said it flat, like I was reading a headline off the news. He didn't ask if I was serious. He just put a hand on my back and waited while I opened it. The allegations were bold: defamation of character, intentional infliction of emotional distress, creating a toxic environment within the family, and at the bottom, her witness list. My mother, Velma. There it was, in black ink, an affidavit signed by the woman who gave birth to me, saying she had observed Sedona's patterns of jealousy and manipulation over the years, and feared the emotional impact her behavior had on Rhiannon's mental health. Dariel read it all, jaw tight, eyes scanning each page like he couldn't believe what he was seeing. I didn't cry. I laughed, short, humorless. "She's painting me like some hysterical villain in a movie she directed." I set the envelope aside and pulled out my laptop. "They want a show?" I muttered. "Fine. I'll give them a script with receipts." That night, after dinner, I logged into the bank account Dariel and I had opened for wedding-related expenses. We hadn't touched it in weeks, but something had been bothering me. A vague memory, half-formed and ignored. 3 days before the ceremony, a transfer had been made. $2,000 gone, sent to an account I didn't recognize. Dariel hadn't done it. I certainly hadn't. That left one possibility. I remembered Rhiannon offering to help track the budget early on. She'd convinced me to let her sync the spreadsheets. "You've got so much on your plate already," she'd said, with a practiced smile and false warmth. "Let me take that off your hands." I logged into the admin panel of the finance app we'd used and pulled the IP logs. The same IP address that had accessed and deleted RSVP data. It had authorized that $2,000 transfer. I stared at the screen, rage simmering under my skin like a low flame. $2,000. My money, moved quietly, disguised as a favor, disappeared into whatever void Rhiannon had carved for herself. I documented it all, screenshots, timestamps, internal email alerts. Then I called the bank and flagged the transfer. "Possible unauthorized activity," I said calmly. They opened a case immediately. The next twist came 2 nights later. I was just finishing dishes when my phone rang. Mavis. "Hey, kiddo," she said, her voice unusually sharp. "You have a minute?" "Sure. Everything okay?" "I just left a dinner at your mom's. I'm sorry, I have to tell you something." I walked into the living room, sat down. "Go ahead." She was laughing, telling this story about how dramatic you always were as a kid, called you a walking guilt trip, said, and I quote, "She never grew out of needing to feel wronged." Everyone chuckled. I felt heat rush to my cheeks. "I couldn't just sit there," Mavis continued, "so I recorded it. I didn't mean to, it just happened. I had my phone in my lap. I didn't respond right away." "You want me to send it?" she asked gently. "Please," I said. The audio came through 20 minutes later. My mother's voice, light and airy, like she was discussing a recipe, not her daughter. "You know Sedona," she said with a soft chuckle. "She's been performing since she was 10, always so wounded. If you look at her too long, she'll think you hate her." They all laughed. A few clinks of cutlery. Someone said, "Well, some people just live for the drama." It was all there. Casual, cruel, cozy. I saved the file and emailed it to my attorney with the subject line, Exhibit A, Character. That weekend, Daryl and I drove to the lake to clear our heads. We didn't talk much. He held my hand on the drive, squeezed it when I didn't realize I needed grounding. We walked the trail around the water in silence, our boots crunching on dried leaves. Halfway around the loop, I stopped and looked out across the rippling surface. A family was nearby, tossing bread to ducks, laughing as the wind tangled their scarves. I turned to Daryl and said, "They turned on me." He looked at me. "I know." "But I'm not walking into that courtroom broken," I said. "I'm walking in prepared." He nodded. "And you won't be walking in alone." I smiled, just a little. Back at home, I opened a new folder. Legal. Everything went in. Dated, labeled, ordered. They had drawn the battle lines. They thought they could shame me into silence, use reputation as a weapon, twist concern into manipulation, mask betrayal as protection. But I wasn't asking for approval anymore. I was submitting evidence. I submitted the final folder to my lawyer that Friday. By Monday morning, we were in court. Daryl took off work to sit beside me. He didn't ask if I wanted him there. He just showed up, suit jacket draped over his arm, holding my favorite granola bar like it was armor. I didn't eat it, but I appreciated the gesture. The courtroom wasn't grand. It smelled faintly of floor wax and old paper, like most municipal buildings do. There was no dramatic music, no pounding gavels, just beige walls and straight-backed chairs that made you sit up whether you wanted to or not. Rhiannon entered like she was stepping onto a movie set. She wore a cream blouse buttoned to the collar, a soft gray skirt, and just enough makeup to look like she hadn't tried. Her hair was pulled into a low bun. She looked demure, wounded, saintly. Velma sat behind her, hands folded neatly in her lap, lips pressed into a thin line of maternal concern. When our eyes met, she blinked. That was all. The judge, a man who looked like he'd rather be fishing than settling a family feud, called us to order. The first part of the hearing was Rhiannon's. Her attorney led her gently through the testimony. She dabbed at her eyes with a tissue when she described how my baseless accusations had affected her emotionally, how her social media partnerships had pulled back, how she felt unsafe, publicly smeared by someone who was supposed to be family. "I've never wanted anything but peace," she said, voice trembling. "But this campaign against me, it's taken a toll on my mental health and my career." I watched her, wondering if she'd practiced that speech in the mirror. I wondered if Velma had helped her rehearse. When it was my lawyer's turn, he stood slowly, calmly. "Your Honor," he said, "we'd like to submit Exhibit B." He handed the clerk a printed email chain. It's a forward from Miss Rhiannon Jennings to her attorney. The subject line reads, quote, "How to frame this to win." The judge raised an eyebrow. The courtroom, until then subdued, rustled with whispers. My lawyer continued, "Within the body of this message, Miss Jennings outlines how she intends to use phrases like emotional distress and defamation strategically, not in response to harm done, but as a tactic to regain control of public perception." Rhiannon's attorney objected on relevance. Overruled. Velma leaned forward, whispering something harsh behind Rhiannon's shoulder. The judge adjusted his glasses and read the email silently for a moment before asking, "Miss Jennings, can you confirm this email is yours?" Rhiannon hesitated. Her throat moved like she'd swallowed glass. I don't remember sending that." "Do you deny it came from your account?" he asked again. She blinked. "No, I don't deny it." That's when things began to shift. My lawyer methodically walked through our timeline. The RSVP tampering, the unauthorized money transfer, the gift table footage, the wedding photos she curated, the audio recording from Velma. And now, the email, each one layered like sediment, pressing down on the image Rhiannon had painted. Velma's cousin, who had come just to be polite, stood and quietly exited the gallery. Then Mavis. Then a man I recognized from childhood, my Uncle Alan, who muttered on his way out, "I knew something always felt off about that girl." Rhiannon's composure began to fray. She fumbled through a response about being misunderstood and family dynamics that people on the outside wouldn't understand. But no one was interrupting her now. No one was swooping in to fix it. Darielle leaned closer and whispered, "You haven't said a word, but you've already won the room." I didn't smile, not out of restraint, but because it wasn't joy I felt. It was clarity. This wasn't revenge. This was standing in the truth and refusing to be pulled out of it. The judge called for a short recess. I remained seated while others filed out. I caught a glance from Velma as she passed me. Her face was unreadable, but her eyes looked tired. Tired in the way people get when they realize the script they've followed for years no longer makes sense to the audience. Outside in the hallway, Rhiannon leaned against the wall, checking her phone. I didn't approach her. There was nothing left to say. Back in the courtroom, the judge returned and addressed both parties. "This is not the place to mend family wounds," he began, "but it is the place to determine credibility. And I'm inclined to believe Ms. Jennings has presented a consistent and well-documented account." He didn't deliver a final verdict yet, but his tone left no ambiguity. As we gathered our things, I noticed Velma had left without saying goodbye. It was fine. I didn't need closure from someone still living in a performance. In the parking lot, Darielle opened the car door for me. Before I got in, I looked up at the sky. Clear. Blue. Still. I didn't feel triumphant. I felt whole. We returned to court that Wednesday morning. It was overcast outside, the kind of sky that made everything feel like it was waiting to be decided. Inside the courthouse, the same seats, the same stiff air, the same dull beige walls. But something had shifted. Not in the room, but in me. The judge called my name. I stood. Not because someone had told me to, but because I chose to. He asked if I had anything to say before ruling. My lawyer gave me a small nod. I walked slowly to the front, heart steady, not racing. I didn't bring notes. I didn't practice a speech. I just let the truth rise, sentence by sentence, without needing to dress it up. I was asked to move my wedding for her feelings. I was told it was too soon, too unfair, too complicated for my sister to handle, so I waited. I looked at Rhiannon, but only briefly. Then I was told my wedding didn't matter, that their attendance would be too much for her, that the day I was supposed to be celebrated needed to be quiet, for her sake. I swallowed, but not from nerves, from restraint. Then, when I said nothing, they went further. My guest list was altered. My bank account was tampered with. My gifts disappeared. My photos were edited. My name was left off the contract. And when I finally started asking why, suddenly I was the aggressor. I took a breath. I didn't file this counterclaim to get even. I filed it because, at some point, you have to stop asking for someone else to tell your story right, and start telling it yourself. When I returned to my seat, the room was completely silent. Even Rhiannon looked down at her lap. The judge leaned forward, hands steepled. "I've reviewed the full record," he began. "And while this is clearly a complex family dynamic, there's little ambiguity in the documentation." He turned toward Rhiannon's table. "Miss Jennings, your initial suit is dismissed on grounds of insufficient evidence and demonstrated intent to manipulate the legal process." Then he looked at me. "Ms. Jennings, your counterclaim is accepted. The court recognizes financial loss, reputational harm, and deliberate obstruction. A mediation schedule will be ordered to negotiate terms of restitution." Velma stood up and left the courtroom before the gavel came down. I watched her walk out, shoulders straight, head high, but her pace faster than usual. She didn't look back. I didn't follow her. Rhiannon lingered longer. She packed her purse slowly, as if hoping someone would stop her and say she'd been misunderstood. No one did. Outside the courthouse, it was colder than it looked. Daryl handed me my coat before I asked. Mavis was waiting by the steps, arms crossed over her chest like she'd been holding something in for weeks. She hugged me tightly, whispered, "I'm proud of you," and didn't let go for a long moment. Daryl didn't say anything right away. He just stood beside me, hand on my shoulder, until the weight in my chest finally shifted. "You did what they thought you never would," he said softly. "You said it." I nodded, but I didn't smile. Instead, I exhaled. For the first time, it felt complete. Not fixed, but whole. A quiet knowing that I had stood up and been heard. That evening, after dinner, I went out back and sat on the steps with a cup of tea. The yard was still. No wind, no rustling branches, just space. I watched as the sun dipped below the tree line, soft and gold like a secret that no longer needed to be hidden. I opened my journal, not the one filled with dates and screenshots, a different one I hadn't touched in months. And I wrote, I didn't want to win. I just wanted them to stop pretending I didn't exist. There was no gloating, no hunger for more, just quiet, because the truth had stood up with me, and it had stayed. And the most healing part wasn't that the judge believed me. It was that I believed myself. 2 months passed before I saw her name again. It came in a pale ivory envelope, tucked between a utility bill and a grocery flyer in our Vermont mailbox. No return address. But I recognized the handwriting. Too perfect to be casual. Too curated to be real. I stood on the porch, boots dusted in dirt from the garden path, Millie sleeping near my feet. I opened the envelope with one hand while holding my coffee in the other. Inside was a wedding invitation. Rhiannon and Daniel join us for a celebration of love, family, and new beginnings. It was printed on embossed cardstock, thick and heavy like money. Gold trim, a blush ribbon. The whole thing screamed image. But no note, no apology, no acknowledgement of what had just taken place in a courtroom 2 months earlier. She'd cried in court. The judge had ruled in my favor. Velma had slipped out before the end. And now here she was, pretending like none of it happened. I walked inside, placed the envelope on the kitchen counter, and took another sip of coffee. Then, I grabbed a black pen from the drawer, wrote "Return to sender" across the front, and slid it back into the mailbox. That was it. Not because I was angry, because I was finally done waiting. The house Daryl and I bought sat on 3 wooded acres outside Brattleboro. Cedar-sided, white trim, wrap-around porch. It wasn't big, but it was ours. On Sunday mornings, I made pancakes and read on the porch swing while Millie snored beside me. Daryl chopped wood and talked to the birds like they were neighbors. Sometimes I let myself breathe so deeply I forgot what it felt like to hold my breath for years. I planted herbs in the windowsill. I rearranged the books in our living room just for fun. I started painting again. Nothing good, nothing worth framing, but honest strokes on paper that made me feel like I could still create something no one else could erase. There were days I didn't think of them at all. But when I did, it wasn't like before. It didn't ache. It was just information. A distant fact, like remembering an old address or a song you used to play on repeat when you didn't know any better. I found a picture of myself the other week while organizing files on my laptop. Taken at age 11, braces still new, hair frizzy, eyes uncertain. I paused on it longer than I expected to. "You'll make it out," I whispered, looking into those wide eyes. "You'll stop needing their permission to breathe." I never got that letter from my mom, the one Rhiannon had tucked away in her drawer. I never got the dance, the toast, the front row seat filled with people clapping just for me. But I got here, and that's enough. A few nights after the wedding invitation, I sat down at my desk and wrote a letter to Rhiannon. Not to send, to let go. "Dear Rhiannon, you didn't break me. You just showed me where I'd already been cracked. You were never the storm. You were just the weather I had to learn to walk through. I hope your wedding is everything you want it to be. I won't be attending, not out of spite, but because I'm no longer performing in a play I didn't write. I won't be there for the photos, or the speeches, or the perfect narrative, because peace doesn't need to be seen. I folded the paper, walked to the fireplace, lit a match, and watched the flame curl upward, eating the words slowly, line by line. Dariel walked in halfway through and didn't ask questions. He just put a blanket around my shoulders and sat beside me. Later that evening, I added one more line to my journal. Forgiveness doesn't mean return. It means I've stopped rehearsing what I'd say if you gave me a chance. I won't show up, not to your wedding, not to your story. You'll have to write the rest of it without me. Sometimes I think people imagine healing as a finish line, a confetti moment, a banner that says, "You made it." It isn't. It's more like this. Silent mornings, coffee brewed how I like it, the sound of wind chimes, and no need to prove a thing. I don't live in a fantasy of reconciliation. I live in the quiet. And for the first time, it doesn't feel empty. It feels free. She cried in court. I walked away in peace. That's the difference between being seen and being free.